This is where the Trae Young story in Atlanta is turning a corner, and not the direction Hawks fans hoped. Multiple reports, including one from Sean Serrani, indicate that conversations are now underway between Trae Young, his camp, and the Hawks about moving him out of Atlanta. This is not idle offseason speculation anymore. After tracking this situation closely, the pieces are aligning in a way that makes a trade a realistic near-term outcome. To understand why we've arrived at this moment, it helps to step back and retrace how expectations diverge from reality. Heading into the season, Atlanta looked like a team intentionally constructed to compete around Trae. The roster on paper had a reasonable shape. Wings who could theoretically complement a high-usage point guard, depth in the front court, and the assumption that Trae would run the offense efficiently while the surrounding players supplied defense and spacing. That blueprint made sense as a concept, but the on-court execution never matched the theoretical fits. The team has underperformed in the standings, and more importantly, the lineup constructions have repeatedly shown a poor fit when Trae is on the floor. More than a simple downturn in wins and losses, the deeper signal is organizational direction. Atlanta appears to be pivoting toward a younger, more versatile identity, and one that elevates emerging pieces like Jalen Johnson and gives greater latitude to players who can occupy multiple roles on both ends of the floor. The plan to persist with Trae as the central figure has, according to internal cues and the reporting we're seeing, unraveled. Two new details accelerate the shift from idle chatter to plausible transaction. First, the Hawks reportedly passed on offering Trae an extension last offseason. That fact was known only in outline before, but we understood Trae had not signed a long-term extension and that he retains a 2026 player option. But how extension talks concluded was murky. Learning that Atlanta did not even attempt to negotiate an extension is a loud organizational message. Front offices rarely decline to engage with the option of keeping a franchise cornerstone unless they are prepared to consider moving on. Second, multiple reports now suggest the Hawks and Trae's camp are discussing a trade. Put those two facts together, no extension offer and active trade conversations, and the probability that Trae is moved before the trade deadline increases materially. However, recognizing that a deal is likely is not identical to predicting the Hawks will extract maximum return. A pair of core constraints will limit Atlanta's leverage: the market value of Trae at this moment and the short list of realistic suitors. Market value is depressed for several interconnected reasons. Trae is playing through injury. This season has been, by multiple accounts, the most uneven of his career since his rookie year, and his contract situation, the player option in 2026, creates uncertainty around whether an acquiring team is securing a long-term building block or a short-term rental. Any franchise that trades assets for Trae now risks turning those assets into only 2.5 months of playoff contention, unless they are confident they can either negotiate an extension quickly or that Trae will opt in. When you combine current underperformance, health questions, and looming free agency ambiguity, Trae's trade value drops relative to what it would be in an idealized market. There are also stylistic and roster fit concerns. Trae is a high-usage, ball-dominant guard who has been criticized for inconsistent defense and efficiency. For windowed contenders debating where to invest assets, younger alternatives with perceived longer upside or different skill sets can push Trae down several teams' internal preference lists. All of those factors compress what Atlanta can reasonably expect to receive in return. That leads to the second constraint. How many teams actually want him right now? Scanning the league, the realistic suitors shrink quickly. Teams with championship windows, cap flexibility, and an appetite for a high-usage guard who may be a 2-year commitment are not numerous. The Kings may show up in permutations if they create matching salary, and the Bulls could be considered as an Eastern Conference fit. But the name that keeps surfacing in recent reporting, and that checks a lot of roster construction boxes, is the Washington Wizards. It sounds unexpected at first blush, but when you examine Washington's needs and construction, a trade there begins to make sense. Here's the plausible framework for a Hawks-Wizards swap. Washington moves an expiring veteran contract, typically someone like CJ McCollum in these scenarios, plus a high upside wing who aligns with Atlanta's youth movement, and a late first-round pick that would likely land in the 20s. The precise mechanics could include pick swaps or protections, but the core pieces would be an expiring salary for Atlanta's ledger relief, a young wing to fit the Hawks' timeline, and a draft asset that preserves future optionality. Why would such a trade satisfy both franchises? For Washington, Trae delivers a true primary playmaker, a ball-dominant guard capable of creating off the dribble and generating offense for teammates. The Wizards have been searching for a reliable offensive engine to anchor their identity, and Trae fills that schematic need. Even if he doesn't instantly transform the current season's win-loss total, securing a creator like Trae positions the franchise to build around him heading into the next full year. The strategy would likely be to treat the trade as both a present season upgrade and a long-term investment, the potentially banking on a future extension or an opt-in to keep him beyond the immediate months. There's precedent for teams trading for high-usage scorers whose long-term futures were uncertain, using the acquisition as a way to either sign them subsequently or retool the roster around them. That template is important. A team can be willing to pay a measured price up front for the chance to control a player's situation at crucial decision points. For Atlanta, the calculus is relatively straightforward. Moving Trae would remove the looming contract uncertainty from the ledger, provide an expiring salary that grants short-term financial flexibility, add a young wing aligned to their new timeline, and deliver a draft asset to restock future options. If the Hawks are earnest about pivoting around players such as Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, and other developmental pieces, shedding Trae creates both a schematic freedom and the capacity to explore different roster constructions without the constraints of undoable usage and salary commitments. Of course, any such trade carries caveats. From Washington's perspective, acquiring Trae while still in a volatile season could mean purchasing potential more than immediate wins. If the Wizards continue to lose in the short term, integrating a ball-dominant guard could complicate developmental objectives and dampen fan enthusiasm. The ideal scenario for a team in Washington's shoes would be to make the trade, secure the pick and the young player, and then work to either reach an extension or secure a contract decision from Trae prior to a competitive free agent market emerging. That reduces the chance of the move becoming a costly midseason gamble. If I were to sketch the most balanced exchange, it would look like this: an expiring veteran contract that allows Atlanta to clear near-term salary, a promising floor-spacing wing who can defend at an acceptable level and grow within a younger Hawks core, and a late first-round pick that perhaps a mid to late 20s selection or a swap. That package is equitable to both sides given the current constraints, and it aligns closely with what the reporting has suggested is realistic. Why would Washington take that calculated risk? Because standing pat also has a cost. The current alternative, it continuing on the existing roster construction without a reliable primary creator, has not produced the kind of consistent offensive identity that leads to sustainable competitiveness. Trae still draws defenses and creates shots for others at an elite volume when healthy, and adding a creator of that caliber could be the structural move necessary to change the team's trajectory. If the Wizards can convert a trade into a longer-term relationship, the payoff could justify the upfront asset expenditure. For Atlanta, the decision to not pursue an extension is nearly decisive. You do not decline to engage on a long-term deal with your best player unless you have concluded that the fit is no longer viable or that the team's identity is better served by a reset. When a franchise refuses to pursue the option of locking up a star, the internal directive is clear. The organization is running scenarios that include moving on. In that light, accepting a package that isn't maximal in perceived value can be a rational step if it allows the team to reshape its roster and timeline. That reshaping could take multiple forms. The immediate outcome of a trade to Washington would be to signal that the Hawks are Jalen Johnson's team. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Onyeka Okongwu, and other young pieces would move into clearer, more defined roles. Atlanta could then use the incoming assets, the expiring contract, the wing, the pick, either to bolster the young core, package in a larger trade, or create the financial flexibility to chase a different core identity in free agency or via additional trades. There has also been speculation that moving Trae could open the door to ambitious three-team scenarios, where Atlanta might swing for an all-star caliber frontcourt piece. Such a move would be aggressive, but becomes conceivable once you remove the heavy usage and salary that comes with a player like Trae. Emotionally, this is a complex moment for Hawks fans. The Trae era delivered highs of playoff runs and moments of elite offensive creativity, but it also featured recurring shortcomings, shooting inefficiencies, defensive lapses, and periodic availability issues. Front offices must make hard calls when a player and organizational direction failed to coalesce into consistent success. Moving on can be painful in the short term, but it is sometimes the clearest path forward when the present trajectory is not meeting expectations.